The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge, we are two of a kind Ryan Luis Rodriguez presiding. We are eyes for the Honorable Judge Rodriguez.
Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of The People vs. Octopussy, a 1983 spy film starring Roger Moore as James Bond, who must unravel a Soviet-linked jewelry smuggling operation run by a mysterious woman named, yes, Octopussy. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always, in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Mr. Maynard Bangs, you're appearing on behalf of the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Your Honor, esteemed members of the court, upon the release of 1979's Moonraker, which this very same court has previously found guilty, the film was heavily criticized for being overly absurd, campy, and generally the silliest of Roger Moore's outings. As if in response to these criticisms, the follow-up to Moonraker, 1981's For Your Eyes Only, pulled drastically in the opposite direction, featuring a taut, espionage-centric story at the center of the Cold War, with realistic, tangible stakes, and a return to low-tech, low-key Bond, per Entertainment Weekly. It seemed with For Your Eyes Only, the franchise had acknowledged the failings of the Moore era and course-corrected, crafting a story harkening back to the days of Sean Connery. However, upon release of 1983's Octopussy, the film we will be dealing with today, it seems the filmmakers had once again been seduced by its more baser, campier tendencies, while still retaining a plot strongly entrenched in the realities of the Cold War. What it produced is a contradiction, a film with several absurd, eye-rolling sequences amidst an otherwise very earnest, albeit admittedly dry, storyline, the result of which is sure to disappoint both fans of a more somber, down-to-earth 007, as well as those fond of his campier, sillier endeavors. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bangs. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Mr. Matt Sherman. Please present your opening statement.
Ladies and gentlemen of this podcast and jury, your esteemed Your Honor, and Snoop Dogg Shiz Honor, the Most High Mayor of Bondtown. Writing the luscious reels of 1983's Octopussy, I intend to introduce a tripartite defense of non compos mentis, habeas corpus, and James Bondus is terrificus. Octopussy is so entertaining. It was the first film I sat through twice in one sitting, and not just because I was utterly unable to find the theater's exit. It is the 13th Eon James Bond film, and ladies and gentlemen, in 13 words, Octopussy embodies most of the best the James Bond franchise offers theatergoers. I had to make the compound word theatergoers 2 words to get to 13, but you see my point. And regarding 1983's Octopussy, if I may continue unanimously, Bond's creator Ian Fleming said absolutely nothing because he died in 1964. However, if Ian Fleming was still alive, being born in 1908, he would today be a miraculous 114 years old, so he still couldn't say too much, but if he had an oxygen tank, good hearing aids, and a voice amplifier as powerful as the ones used by Paul Muad'Dib's legions as heard in David Lynch's Dune epic, he would tell us, and I quote, "I like that Roger Moore chap. I like him rather a lot." Why? Since Moore was the original choice for James Bond, that's right, after Bond producers Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman rejected Mr. Fleming's first choice, his dear personal friend David Niven. Fleming said, "Fine, let's use the handsome, dashing young bloke Anne and I saw on the telly instead, Roger Moore." That would have made Sir Raj Bond between 1962 and 1985, including Octopussy. But I must hereby cite from the case of The People v. Stephen King, as we find in the Latin, if I may, primus inter pares authoris authoritarius. That is, the author is always right, unless rich and opinionated like J.K. Rowling or Stephen King. Or as Fleming said, thanks to the great fiscal success of my books, I can now afford a fresh change of underwear daily. And therefore, as I proudly stand upon Mr. Fleming's own underwear, I cite the words of Gary Oldman. I am Dracula. I am 700 years old and have done a tremendous amount of sucking. An octopus does not suck. Octopus is guilty, ladies and gentlemen, only of being innocent of all silver screen crimes. So help me God, in this honorable court, may Judge Judy, Judge Janine, and Judge Reinhold so find. Amen. Thank you, and may God bless the United States of Great Britain.
Yeah!
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. That was a lot. Mr. Bangs?
Best
you may
opening
proceed with your
statement
first
ever.
exhibit.
First, Your Honor, I'd like to state that at no point in this film are we ever introduced to a person with 8 vaginas. So, right
That
out
you
the
know
gate,
of.
I
flagrant-
object. Your Honor, I must object on the grounds that the prosecution is probably right.
Well, good. Exactly. So,
Sustained?
flagrant false advertising right out the gate. And if we had been, we wouldn't be here today. But I'd like to elaborate further on the points I introduced in my opening statement. That's kind of the core of my argument. Octopussy weaves a plot surrounding a very believable conspiracy involving jewel smugglers who unwittingly participate in the import of a nuclear weapon onto a U.S. airbase in West Germany. Some very serious stuff. In fact, the final script was inspired by a real-world scandal within the Soviet Union involving the son of a politician manipulating the Moscow State Circus to smuggle jewelry. However, coloring in this very believable plot are some of the most absurd moments in the franchise. These include a ridiculous sequence where Bond performs a Tarzan yell while swinging on a jungle vine to escape baddies. Another moment where Bond disguises himself in a gorilla costume to avoid the detection of sinister guards. And possibly most egregiously, at a pivotal moment in the film, just as the aforementioned bomb is set to detonate, killing a slew of innocent circus goers, including children, and possibly triggering World War III, Bond is dressed up as a circus clown, complete with wig and makeup. All of the children in the circus laugh at his various failed attempts at slapstick comedy, but we in the audience do not.
Your Honor, I must object. Is the prosecution saying he's proving my case? If you cannot believe Roger Moore is a clown, it's because you completely believe he's a dashing, wonderful spy, therefore the incongruence.
No. This film literally reduces 007 to the level of a clown, which seriously detracts from the severity of this world-threatening situation. The problem with making Bond a silly clown in this instance is that it clashes off the success of the previous film to pull Bond back down to earth. That would be my point. So it's also a return to form of Bond's more juvenile sense of humor. He has moments of still being somewhat clever, but it is drowned out by plenty of adolescent immaturity, including a moment where he tells a snake charmer to play with his asp, and a scene where Bond zooms a camera in on a strange woman's bosom. This Bond is not the ultimate sexual, irresistible masculine figure we've seen in Connery, but more of a sex-obsessed little boy who's just found his dad's porno stash.
Your Honor, I must object. I must object. At that time in the Reagan and Thatcher years of the early 1980s, the Movie Review Board in the UK was allowing up to 2 well-formed yet egregious or else gregarious breasts per film.
Well, some would say, no, Gresser, agrarious. Now,
Some would.
Add to this that Bond has an array of impractical gadgets, again in his arsenal, including a crocodile-shaped mini-sub, a fake horse trailer complete with mini-plane, and a pen that excretes acid, which, mind you, his captors fail to confiscate from him when they take him prisoner. It is obvious that the creators of this film have severely reverted to their worst instincts that were indicative of the time prior to For Your Eyes Only.
I object, Your Honor, on the poison pen case. It's an inside joke. An actor uses a pen to make notes on a movie screenplay. The screenwriters are describing how this movie was forged into utter greatness.
No, I think it's sort of how the pen dissolved this story into a pile of malleable mush.
Does the prosecution really expect everyone to believe that there aren't going to be silly gadgets in a Bond film? I mean, that's
Yes.
stock in trade.
There are many gadgets in the Connery years where they are not silly. Connery wasn't running around in a crocodile mini sub, right? He would have just gone with a little bamboo shoot in his mouth.
You mean like when his Aston Martin shot out thousands of gallons of water greater than any fire truck, or when he put on a helmet so he wouldn't get shot while wearing a jetpack and flying through the air, or when he wore, say, a clown costume, a costume with a seagull on his head, taking a poop on his head when he came out of the water in Goldfinger.
I don't think he had any seagull poop on his head in Goldfinger. I don't remember that sequence at all.
Let's roll the tape.
Now, as far as the jetpack, you should wear a helmet when you wear a jetpack, just in case you come down upside down. So good for Connery for thinking that through. Now, my next exhibit, let's talk about this film's Bond girl, Maud Adams, who plays the titular Octopussy. Although, again, we assume she only has one.
I object. You cannot go to the titular issue on 2 successive cases.
Yes, I can. In fact, I will.
Yeah, I'm actually going to overrule that one. You can.
Now, I use Bond girl with some hesitancy. Perhaps Bond MILF would be a more appropriate term. As at 38 years old, Adams is the oldest performer to fulfill this particular niche in the franchise. Honor Blackman was 37 in Goldfinger. But otherwise, this is a role almost exclusively filled by actresses in their 20s and early 30s in the very prime of their youth. Now, while I acknowledge that everything I just said is completely sexist as fuck, remember we're talking about a film series steeped in chauvinism, the objectification of women, and male sexual fantasy escapism. Bond is this ultimate symbol of aspirational virility, acts as some kind of, someone that the male audience members can live vicariously through for the purposes of wish fulfillment. And the last thing...
This is getting egregious.
No, it's going to remain egregious. We're just starting. The last thing that audience wants is to see old Aunt Maud pulling up in her Dodge Caravan and taking 007 out to eat at Ruby Tuesdays.
Oh, God!
Octopussy is the matriarch of this young band of scantily clad, admittedly sexy, circus performers turned thieves and smugglers. Likely included because old Maud lacked the adequate amount of sex appeal herself. And that's exactly how she feels in this film. Matriarchal. She's protective of Bond, almost motherly. She's not at all the object of lustful, youthful desire that always encapsulates the coveted role of Bond girl.
Mr. Sherman?
Where to begin, Your Honor? Octopussy fills the screen with hot babes. It's not just Maud Adams. It's not just Christina Wayborn. But Robert Brown as M. Remember, when asked if older bald men like him are the sexiest, Sean Connery said, and I quote, "How should I know? I've never been with an older bald man."
I'm going to check that credibility of that quote, Your Honor. Now, I've picked on poor Maud Adams for being too old long enough. So now let me pick on Roger Moore for being too old.
Oh, God.
Roger Moore is old. He's 56 during the making of this movie. To put that in perspective, Sean Connery was only 41 when Diamonds Are Forever was released. Connery's last Bond film for Eon Productions. Or to put it in even better perspective, Connery was only 53 when he reprised the role of 007 in Never Say Never Again, released in the same year as Octopussy, 1983. And that was literally a movie about how James Bond was too old and out of shape to be James Bond. And
Your Honor, I must object on the grounds that the prosecution is using far too many facts and numbers.
That's true.
I'm going to sustain that one.
Your Honor, you're the worst. Listen,
Reel it in, Maynard. Reel it in.
Oh,
Roger
I'm the
Moore.
worst, am I? Do you want me to sustain even more?
Yes, more and more. Furthermore, I object on the grounds that the bathrooms in India are absolutely terrible, thus contributing to Roger Moore's pained appearance.
That I will concede to that. Now, Roger Moore is so old that he's even older than old Maud Adams by nearly 20 years. And she's older than dirt. Her social security number is 2. And yet the filmmakers expect you to sit there and watch Moore and Adams huff and puff and wheeze their way through sex scenes between doses of Metamucil, Viagra, and prune juice. And I won't stand for it, Your Honor. This is not my Bond.
Mr.
In the
Sherman,
Connery
is
Latin,
Roger
Your
Moore
Honor,
too old?
that's simply not true. It's a lie, a dirty, bold-faced lie. I was 88 when I made Never Say Never Again.
He looked like it, and he still looked younger than Roger Moore. Now, let's talk about the villains. They're boring. First, we have French actor Louis Jourdan playing exiled Afghan Prince Kamal Khan, who sports a suspiciously thick French accent. He has all the charisma and personality of a tax lawyer. Next, we have Steven Berkoff, who plays rogue Soviet General Orlov, whose performance makes fearless leader from Rocky and Bullwinkle look subdued. And finally, we have Khan's henchman, Kabir Bedi, who is essentially just a very strong guy, but at least he's actually Indian. Now, this is a pretty uninspired assortment of villains for a Bond film, with none of the panache or style of an Odd Job or Jaws or even a T.H. Johnson. The most interesting baddie Moore faces is some nameless assassin brandishing a buzzsaw yo-yo weapon that's only effective when his targets are standing 10 feet directly below him and held perfectly still.
I object on the grounds of Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Bump, bump.
That one's stricken from the record, Your Honor. They're getting tenuous. Anyway, I'd like to try to, as my last point, Your Honor, try to explain the plot.
Hold on. I want to hear Mr. Sherman's defense of the villains of this film.
Fair.
Well, my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, Louis Jourdan is pitch perfect. Now, people dislike Christoph Waltz as Blofeld in Spectre because he underplayed it, or Jonathan Pryce in Tomorrow Never Dies for chewing the scenery and overplaying it. But Louis Jourdan is pitch perfect, one of those rare Bond villains who doesn't need a facial scar or a disease to be menacing, yet wholly entertaining. I believe him as a prince, an aesthete, a gourmet who is personally immaculate in his appearance and manners, but someone who misses and covets the power he once held. I believe he is corrupt with a dash of menacing. He needs only a dash because to him, Bond is a fly to swat. I can go on and on and on, but Louis Jourdan was perfectly cast.
All right, Mr. Banks.
I think that Jourdan proves to be incompetent in the face of Bond several times. Every time he meets up with Bond, Bond gets the upper hand on him, including in the backgammon scene in the casino, and when he pretty much takes Octopussy's good faith. Octopussy likes Bond more than she does Kamal Khan.
Does the prosecution expect the jury to believe that the villain should run the world or that Bond should get the upper hand? The Bond series would have been over after one film.
I think I'd like to see a villain that is menacing, that can get one up on him. Even Goldfinger, even though he loses the golf game, is then, later he's able to kill Jill Masterson. I think I have that in reversed order. But the point is...
Kabir Bedi? What is Kabir Bedi, Govinda, whom you mentioned, one of my favorite henchmen in the series. Off screen, the women would chase him. He was tall, powerful, handsome. He was really almost a fuller realization of Fleming's original Odd Job character. Did you know that Odd Job stood well over 6 feet tall? Fleming wrote, "Faced by such a man," thought Bond, "one could only go down on one's knees and wait for death." He also gets one of the biggest laughs ever in any Bond film. He's fanatically loyal. He's obedient to Kamal Khan. And when Bond is messing around atop Kamal's plane, he barks at Govinda to go out there and get him. And Govinda pauses a beat, then says, "Out there?" It's one of the funniest moments in the film because he's so huge and strong and powerful and crushes dice with his hands.
Yeah, and he's too stupid to grab a parachute before he goes out and fights.
Parachutes were not included in the
plane has no parachutes. Your Honor, objection. Planes have to have parachutes. They're safety devices. They are required. Thank you. Now, lastly here, I'm going to struggle to explain the plot of this film because it's actually incredibly convoluted and it's really difficult to follow. So,
Your Honor, I must object. Man loses egg, man gets woman.
Well, if you object, I would love to have you explain the plot of the jewelry smuggling and how it ties in with the nuclear weapons.
I object because the Fabergé egg was an object d'art. I object because it was an object. But I'll tell you this, the plot is so simple, and it's based on a brilliant original Fleming short story that took place with the real-world fellow who worked in the auction houses at Sotheby's, and they are trying to pawn off fake eggs to steal the real jewels in Moscow. But Khan is double-crossing Octopussy, who's the jewelry smuggler who aids him, and is using her jewelry smuggler cabal the women who are very powerful. They're sort of like the Octopussy. They're sort of like, the Goldfinger Abracats, the Goldfinger plane flyers from Fleming and from the Goldfinger film.
Pussy Galore's Flying Circus.
Pussy Galore's Flying Circus in the film. The Abracats became the Flying Circus. Yes, you're right. And the Octopussy's cabal is being used and twisted to smuggle, unbeknownst to them, an atomic bomb, which is brilliant.
I'd like to
because
ask,
it will unilaterally disarm.
what I'd like to ask about this swapping of the fake jewels, we see that these fabrications are very transparent, right? Experts take a look at them immediately and know that they're the fake. So
Except
it doesn't.
that they go on auction for hundreds of thousands of pounds, and so you have art experts who are fooled. The only person they can't fool.
Objection. What the auction that we see is of a real Fabergé egg. That is the real one they've stolen. The fake one was stolen by 009. And 009 has it at the beginning of the film, and then it falls back into MI6's hands. They have it. Southby's is actually auctioning off the real egg, which Kamal Khan has already stolen, and they are now putting up for auction. But unfortunately, because 009 has stolen the egg, Kamal Khan now has to come and bid on the real egg and win it so they can return it so they won't get caught.
Well,
I would sustain that if I actually knew what happened in this film.
That is what happens, Your Honor. It's incredibly hard to follow.
Oh, my God.
It's very hard to follow to the point where our defense here seemed to misunderstand it.
No, Your Honor. The unconsciousness during the film is no defense. There's 2 points here that are salient. One is Bond smuggles the fake egg under his program in his lap.
Correct.
And inserts it for the real egg. And that goes on auction in full view of Sotheby's and everyone, even Emma's fooled. So the fake egg is extraordinarily well done, and in real life, it's a fascinating piece that was built at the cost of thousands of dollars. A lucky fan got it for a few $1,000s in an auction way back in 1983. And
are you that lucky fan?
No, I'm not. But call 1-800-MATT. The other thing that's going on that scene that's amazing, extraordinary, and you don't want to miss it, is Jim Fanning, the art expert who helps Bond. His name anagrams almost to Ian Fleming. He's also a dark Englishman with a broken nose, oiled hair, light blue shirt, almost casual blue jacket, and a Churchillian bow tie. One of those very inside jokes that Bond's been running for years now. One of the best and earliest going back this 40 years. Jim Fanning is Ian Fleming. Jim Fanning is Ian Fleming, and he's even called James or Jim. It's a beautiful inside joke, and Ian Fleming is sitting there with Bond, amazed as Bond swaps out the egg and bids very high on the egg. It's a really stunning film, but it may be too subtle for the prosecution to comprehend.
Well, was. Now, I would like to object, though, that the Fabergé egg as an item, though, they're exquisitely unique. And they are meticulously tracked and accounted for, except for the few lost eggs, and we generally know which ones we have, so we know which ones we don't. That experts at like Sotheby's would know exactly what egg this was, that it belonged to the Kremlin, and that it damn well shouldn't go up for public auction. They'd know it's stolen, and they wouldn't put it up for public auction at all. They would likely turn in the sellers to the proper authorities.
And that's the beauty of the Bond films, is it's just on the edge of believability. It's slightly larger-than-life world. And we're assuming many facts that may or may not be in evidence. For example, how do we know when the expert looks at other items that he even knows is a Fabergé egg? There's no Fabergé egg in the Kremlin that we know of. The Kremlin repository shows us things like the Romanov star. So the egg is listed in the auction program as the property of a lady. Now, unless you think a lady runs the Kremlin repository, Your Honor, I'd say throughout the case, there's no prosecution here.
They would absolutely know that egg is in the Kremlin, because that egg would be accounted for, and it would be well documented as belonging to the Kremlin. These are not obscure items. There are people very obsessed with the tracking. You can go on Wikipedia, and every single egg is pictured or well described with the year it was crafted and where it is now. And that information existed back in the 80s as well. So they would never get this sold off on a public auction at like Sotheby's.
I take it the prosecution is unfamiliar with the concept of a Kremlin brulee. I also must object, Your Honor, from the Latin.
I'm going to have to object to all these puns. I am not going to stand for this.
But we're the man with the
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
I'm glad you were seated at the beginning of this courtroom. Your Honor, I also must object from the Latin, and I cite pleasus, give it to abracus. The concept being roughly translated in the Queen's English as when a film kicks butt for 2 hours straight. We cannot find it guilty for a few self-indulgent seconds, a principle which, may I humbly remind this court, has been used to defend both The Empire Strikes Back and The Force Awakens, but neither The Last Jedi nor The Rise of Skywalker.
I would not defend The Rise of Skywalker. But at that, Your Honor, I will rest, because I'd like to hear what this con man has to say.
I think he's got some eggs to sell us.
Mr. Sherman, you may proceed with your first exhibit.
Where to begin, Your Honor? There's so many holes. The prosecution's case, it's octaholes. The visuals, the soundtrack. I noticed the prosecution neglected to mention how visually and sonically, even in the very notes and the tones that the master John Barry puts in the film, it all resonates in the audience. It's beautiful, melancholic music. It's something innovative. The prosecution cited other greats like Thunderball, where the music sounds like it's been recorded while swimming underwater. You only have twice as Asian elements in it. But Octopussy has a distinct Indian and Pan-Asian feel. The soundtrack is so lush and rich, and that's even for John Barry, who always used a lush style of music. As I would present it to the jury, is there a truly bad movie when the soundtrack composer is 5-time Oscar winner John Barry? That's point number one. Visually, it's also rich. Now, Tim Dalton, interestingly, James Bond after Roger Moore, he called Cubby Broccoli when The Living Daylights was wrapped to say he'd been honored to work with such a professional crew. There was no waste. Everything was tight. And Octopussy is, of course, the same 5-time, that's a record, James Bond director John Glenn. He did them minutely. He storyboarded everything so that nothing is wasted. And other than these very contrived egg stories, the continuity in the film is extraordinary. The locations in particular are satisfying. I personally made 4 different trips to Southwest Utah, 3 of them before bringing a tour group there to see the Utah locations alone that doubled for Cuba and Argentina in Octopussy. A dream come true for someone like me. But, Your Honor, I think I need to be talking about boobs next.
Hold on. I'd like to hear Mr. Bangs respond to the sonic and visual aspects of Octopussy.
It doesn't look bad, except for the few times where clearly it's not Roger Moore and you've got the stunt double and it's sort of painfully obvious, like this on the plane, on the train, swinging on the vine. Those stick out a little bit. But otherwise, no, it's a visually competent film. It's the story that falls apart. And it sounds fine, absolutely.
Your Honor, since the prosecution has a second time played the James Bond Tarzan card and also cited stuntmen, I am obliged to call my rebuttal witness, Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery.
Oh, God.
Here we go.
James Bond, he's the swingingest spy in the world. Yeah, baby, yeah. Bond swings in the trees. Bond swings both ways. But I've lost my marijuana and I've lost my cocaine. Where is my cocaine? Ladies and gents, this is my cocaine.
Yeah, I knew that.
When my friend Sir Roger Moore was in Africa, escaping the lions and the tigers and Goldfinger, he made the noise because that was no stuntman. That was Sir Roger Moore himself. He said it like this. Whoa, 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 whoa. I want 2 Oscars making those noises. That was no stuntman. That was Roger Moore on the vine, as Michael Caine just told us.
That was as much Roger Moore as Michael Caine was just in this room.
Wait a second. Did we have 2 witnesses and one of them just wasn't announced? I'm very confused.
I believe it was clearly Austin.
Witness list, Your Honor.
It was clearly Austin Powers doing a Michael Caine impression, Your Honor. Try to keep up.
At this point, Your Honor, I'm obligated to cite the 1811 landmark case, the state of Illinois versus Connery, Dalton, Lazenby, and Craig. I think there's no need to give a specific point. I think the case law referenced here is quite obvious.
Okay.
Yeah, there you have it, Your Honor. I stick that in your craw.
Mr. Sherman, do you have any further exhibits?
Yes, boobs, Your Honor. 2 of them, as previously admitted. Bond can do that.
He didn't say that earlier.
Bond can do that at Q's office. Your Honor, Bond can do that at Q's office. If he did that in the world, focused a camera on a woman's heaving bosom, it would be wrong. But he and Q are joking around. The way Q says, now pay attention, 007. The weather in India is very hot, so please carry around this gigantic fountain pen in your shirt pocket. 1 hour and 15 minutes into the film, you'll need the acid I've concealed. That's a typical Bond movie trope. You can't
Objection, Your Honor.
Here. You can't do it. However, Q, Your Honor, He has one of the coolest gadgets ever inside the Fabergé egg, a homing and listening device, because the most famous, the most valuable Fabergé eggs, as the prosecution knows, he's well informed, they have a surprise inside them. So in this case, a replica of the Russian Imperial State Coach, Khan finds this bug when General Orlov smashes the egg, making it a surprise within a surprise within an egg, which is great. Incidentally, an inside joke because Orlov has just prepared a scrambled Fabergé egg. And Bond uses this device to listen to Orlov and Khan and to sleuth in a scene filled with a lot of suspense for a Bond film, which is great. And speaking of suspense, earlier in the film, Bond is climbing along the walls of Khan's Monsoon Palace, and Orlov's helicopter almost catches him with its lights. There's a lot of notable, wonderful things in this film. The supporting cast, the prosecution took pot shots at the supporting cast, not just the villains, but what about Vijay Armitage? People adore that character. He's the most important sacrificed lamb who isn't Felix Leiter himself. Janine Sherman and I were watching Octopussy, and she does the, oh no, he died, I liked him bit. He's like comedy relief. He's enthusiastic. He's not an ingenue. He gets funny lines. The audience loves him. You have this really talented ensemble cast. It's just like the one in, say, Casino Royale, 2006, where instead of casting a Halle Berry, making the media go crazy, you have a cast of relatively unknown actors who provide color and culture in the film. Bond is Khan's match. I heard the prosecution say he wasn't. Roger Moore's Bond shows no cracks in his first film, Live and Let Die, but by Octopussy, he's still the older, yes, wiser, yes, world-weary guy who calls the Minister of Defense Freddy. He saved the world. He knows what he's doing. M trusts him. Now, the M's distrusting Bond drives the Danny Craig films, but the Bond of Octopussy has quote-unquote got this, ain't nothing but a thing. Khan tells Bond he will use curare, for example, mixed with psychedelics to wring the truth from him. And Bond replies, but with permanent brain damage. And he's just smothering his emotions, Roger Moore. He's just showing them just enough. He's a spy. This is his lot in life. But Khan's being a jerk. I can imagine Connery or other actors ruining those lines. Roger Moore does a great performance. Octopussy is no exception. I can go on, Your Honor, but I don't wish to. I mean, the pre-titles, they line up with the film. There's continuity. The clown costume, it should require a mention. This is the second most used costumes in any Bond film. There are 7 costumes. Quickly, 007. 009 is a clown. Bond becomes Colonel Toro in the Argentina pre-titles scene. Bond becomes a crocodile, as mentioned. It's brilliant. Bond becomes a corpse. He replaces Mishka. He hides inside an ape costume, and then he wears a clown costume to join Octopussy's circus. And he was
sued by Dana Carvey for stealing his gimmick.
True enough, but may it please the honorable court, I must cite the 1917 case, you may be familiar, Our Planet versus Apes. The appellate court concluded, and I quote, that anyone who makes fun of a human shown in an ape costume on screen is being culturally insensitive to both zookeepers and zoologists, and how can this court tolerate James Bond monkeying around?
I gotta say, I've been here since the beginning. I don't remember any of these cases.
Yes, I remember when you were here in 1917, Your Honor, during World War I. But seriously, that's why it is hilarious and clever, because when Bond is in the ape costume, it's not just gratuitous. The bad guys are talking about the timing of a nuclear weapon, so Bond glances at his watch, a great laugh from the audience, and then Gobinda, who should have his own theme song, of course, Gobinda, he's the man with the deadly plan, dice crushed in his hand. He chops the head off the ape costume. Bond is just exiting the train ceiling. It's great. I've seen the film many times, and every time it gets a good reaction from me. My goodness. We think of Bond as this dashing guy who hides behind nothing, but he's brilliantly using these costumes and these gadgets. Octopussy is a fun film, and it's been a few years since Bond did a fun film. The prosecution said too much camp mixed with too much Cold War. I say the kind of fun we expect at the movies, but not in the Moonraker vein, in a serious, suspenseful way. And the Tarzan yell may not be icing on the cake, but that was John Barry's soundtrack choice. It wasn't John Glenn's as a director's choice. So if you can forgive the Tarzan yell, I think we can get a good movie out of this.
Are you going to rest on that?
I can never rest, Your Honor.
Yes! I love this guy.
My goodness. My goodness. I mean, I picked Octopussy on a video on my channel as the second funniest Bond film. I mean, every time I see it, I get 5 or 6 good chuckles from it, but it's from good humor and sheer joy. Roger Moore and the supporting cast is wonderful. I'm just waiting for the defense to mention sit when Bond tells a tiger to sit. Yet that itself
I forced that out of my brain so that it didn't have I forgot all about him talking to a wild tiger that was trained.
Trauma for the prosecution aside, it's pure Ian Fleming. Because the spy of Ian
Fleming frequently talked to wild tigers, Your Honor. I remember in a case of 1914, Ian Fleming versus tigers.
Oh, no, indeed. The spy of Fleming's not a super genius. He improvises. He takes a little bit of knowledge from his reading or explorations and puts it in play. This was not merely a takeoff on the Barbara Woodhouse training method, sit. It was a CIA experiment in subliminal movie making to see if Roger Moore as James Bond could force the audience to sit in place during the Octopussy safari scene rather than fleeing for the exits. Now I rest.
Both sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Bangs, you may begin.
Your Honor, esteemed members of the court, 1983's Octopussy makes the mistake of reestablishing Bond as a gadget-happy, slapstick absurdity with periodic bouts of sexual overstimulation. And it does this against the backdrop of an inordinately complex and oftentimes dull plot steeped in real-world consequences. The two clash tremendously. In addition to that, it features a withered old hag of a Bond girl plucked right out of ads for menopause treatment.
Jesus!
An even older 007 who needs a chairlift just to get up the stairs before he goes boom boom in his Depends. And a totally forgettable ensemble of antagonists. Does it have a great song? Yes. That will always be Octopussy's one and only contribution to the Bond legacy. But that's why they make soundtracks, folks. The rest of this film has a license to be killed. And when you step into that deliberation room, do the humane thing and put old Maud and Grandpa Roger out of their misery. That's right. This film needs a little euthanasia to make up for its complete lack of youth in Asia it showed on the screen. I thank you.
Oh, that's a terrible pun. But thank you anyway. Mr. Sherman, please present your closing argument.
Ladies and gentlemen of the podcast, I don't think Asia or India is an issue, and for 3 reasons. First, Sean Connery was really good, both as James Bond and as Indiana Jones's father. Think about it. And the other 2 reasons are Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. If it's not too late, I would add to the defense witness list Shia LaBeouf, but it's probably too late. So let's move on to the super cool casino set. The backgammon game was supposed to go into Max Kalba's club in The Spy Who Loved Me, but it's one of the best casino scenes ever. It's not just a bar and a table or 2. There's 6 other games rolling when Bond confronts Kamal Khan in one of the most enjoyable scenes in all the Bond films. I love this Bond movie. It's found in my top lists all the time, not my worst lists. This is a more important case than anything the Supreme Court is currently adjudicating. We have to talk about it. I object on the grounds of coffee in my cup, but I digress. Let's go back to this. There are several reasons to accept this film as a great film, guilty of nothing. That beautiful pre-title sequence, as I said, which is dramatic, right on the beat, included with the plot of the film, where the Octopussy short story from Ian Fleming is masterfully added in some of the biggest Fleming touches. And ladies and gentlemen and circus-attending children of all ages, although in the eyes of the law and in teasers and previews, every film is presumed to be innocent and great until it is proven to be utter garbage. As Maxwell Smart says, I'd make a few chief points. Goldfinger has pussy galore. Diamonds Are Forever has 2 Blofelds with 2 pussies. Need I say more? As the prosecution said, this is the Ocho pussy. A point next. I forget my point, but I'm sure it's equally as impressive as the earlier points I've been making all evening, and I'm not under any medication at all. Furthermore, I am unanimous alone in this. When you like Bond all the way from the first Dr. No to Die Another Day. Yeah, baby, yeah. In the words of the legendary Al Pacino, Octopussy. Better than getting kicked from Pierce Brosnan or watching Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. I am Superman. Ooh, ah.
It's like
wow. Wow.
It's like Robin Williams on speed.
Oh my god, I love this. Holy
Thank
shit.
you both, members of the jury, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, and Mr. Rodriguez, Ryan Luis Rodriguez. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
Those circus performers look so stressed. Their jobs must be intense.
Oh, bailiff! Come on!
It took you a second. Wow. Man, I love Matt Sherman's enthusiasm here. It's I've never experienced that sort of love and dedication to anything that he has to Octopussy. Dylan, what did you think of this case?
All right. First of all, great case. I just I want to stress how much I love everything Matt did. I mean, he had me cracking up. I want to figure out a way we could get it back every week.
Replace me next week. So.
Okay, so
gladly take my place. I don't mind.
Okay, so dialing it back a bit though, Maynard did have some very good points. I actually liked the villains in this, but it is fair to say that they are very subdued compared to other Bond villains. You're not
the Yo-Yo guy though. That's not
even with Yo-Yo guy, that was just too silly, right? Like Jaws could have been silly, but you kind of believe his menace, right? And the same with like Baron Smeedy, the man with the golden gun. I mean, so like these guys have silly elements to them, but you end up taking them seriously. The Yo-Yo guy, like Maynard said, it's like he's only effective if he's 10 feet above you and you're holding still. It's just so it's a little much. And then of course the guy
swing it around or anything.
Yeah, exactly. And like we were talking, and the one thing Maynard and I we watched the movie together while cuddling, and we said if the big guy, the big Indian guy, like if he could do something with his turban, like if the turban was like a whip sword or something like that, would give him just a little extra panache. So even though I did like the main bad guy, Kamala Khan, because I'm a big fan of that actor, which I can get into more later. So I did like them. The plot is pretty confusing. You have a pretty interesting Cold War idea going on, and you have the jewelry smuggling, and these two things are really neat, and either one could make a good story, but wedding them together, I don't think it quite landed the way they wanted it to. So
yeah, I was like, when did we jump to nuke? Like, I thought I was the one that lost that. Like, maybe I was just like, not paying attention. But yeah, that I got lost at some point. Ryan, did you think the plot was bonkers too? Or?
I think I said that in my other identity as the judge. But yes, I have no fucking clue what happens in this movie for all 2 hours and 15 minutes of it. I can't stand this movie. I cannot stand it. I can't believe that I've actually seen it twice now, thanks to this goddamn podcast.
I must have seen that movie twice.
I mean, like, I appreciate
you made a great joke and you don't even know it, Ryan.
I appreciate the case. Yeah, shut up, Dylan. I appreciate the case that Matt Sherman is making, but I can't go to the mat for this film. I just can't. I literally, like, Roger Moore is my least favorite Bond. He always seemed too capable and yet too feeble. Kind of like he's never struck me as imposing or really resourceful in a way, yet he never walks into a situation where I think that he could actually get harmed, which is a real that's a downturn for protagonists for me.
Yeah, he's more lucky than good.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like Moonraker was the same thing. He was just lucky in Moonraker the whole time.
And where Moonraker succeeds, where Octopussy doesn't, is that it goes to space, so I can at least kind of root in the genre of it all. But Octopussy is sillier, yet it's terrestrial. So I don't know how that works exactly.
What about his age? Do you think he's?
I always thought he was too old when he took the job. And I think he's definitely too. I mean, not to be ageist. It's just that when you're
but like factored into the plot if that's what you're doing or something.
Yeah, I mean,
if he looked more like weathered and battle hardened, like Daniel Craig kind of looks old for Bond, but he looks like battle hardened, like he looks like a soldier.
Like he's been through some shit. Where
Yeah.
Roger
Roger
like
Moore
he just
looks
wiped it off his shoulder and was like, yeah, whatever, big
he
deal.
just got off the golf course with his
Yeah.
buddies, you know.
I feel
Yeah.
no ties to him whatsoever. I feel no palpable sense of danger. I don't feel anything when I see him.
Although, to take away from the prosecution, I think Maud Adams is like a better pairing that way. Like, she's older, like she's still 20 years younger than him.
And the
so,
villain is
like, what's
60,
the difference?
so sure, why not?
Right.
But I mean, but still,
Yeah.
do I really want to watch a 56-year-old man fight a 60-year-old man? Not really. Not particularly.
Well,
Well, I
Depends
mean,
on the movie, but not
you've
this
seen
one.
The Expendables, right?
And I
So
did
Ben,
like
what do you, well, that's for another day. Ben, what are you thinking, buddy? Guide us.
I mostly agreed with the prosecution. The plot's off the wall. The Tarzan yell is unforgivable, and yeah, like they forget to take his gadgets off, like when they put him in jail, and this watch is literally like beeping, like at 20.
I did say that while we were watching it, like when his watch be beeping the whole time. Now, to be fair, they didn't know he was a spy, so they didn't know he had gadgets on him, so that's why they didn't take it off him. To be fair. They just thought he was like a blackmailer. They didn't know he was James Bond, International Man of Mystery.
And how does nobody know who he is? He's the most obvious spy in the world. It seems like villains only don't know who he is when it's convenient to the plot, yet he seems to be the most famous man in the world at times.
Actually, you know what? You're absolutely right, Ryan, because they kind of lean into his track record of being so successful. That's why he goes to the auction to begin with. And then to have no one else know who he is after the fact.
And then when the villains then meet him, they go, Mr. Bond, your reputation precedes you. It's like, then why don't you know what the fuck he looks like? Like, come on.
Yeah, he likes his eggs Fabergé. Okay, well, look, okay.
Lock in your verdict?
Really, I'll lock in before Ryan because I'm loud and intrusive, just like the fantastic defense of Matt Sherman. And I got to go to the Matt for that. That was great passion, great energy. And, you know, I'm beginning to rethink how I thought about Moonraker now, kind of looking at how the Roger Moore film should be received. Whereas, you know, Casino Royale is like Batman the Animated Series. I think something like Octopussy is more like Batman Brave and the Bold. I think there's space for this silly kind of Bond. And I think Octopussy does it in a way that's palatable and I really enjoyed. So I'm going to say not guilty.
All right. Ryan?
Well, if Dylan's going to give the pity vote, then I'm just going to go full bore guilty.
It's not a pity vote. Well, we'll find out if it's a pity vote with Ben.
No, I'm counting here. Yeah, I do like the way it looks. I do like the way it sounds. But as far as films looking and sounding great, like, you know, like remember like when Stealth came out and everyone was impressed by its special effects, and then you kind of walk out thinking, well, that's kind of
no one knows what that movie is, Ben. What the hell are you talking about?
Or any movie that's like a special effects, like any you know, Michael Bay movie or like Moonfall or whatever.
Another movie that does not
I feel
exist.
bad about it because the guy loves this so much, but I don't see it. There were way more points that I agreed with on the prosecution side, but I do love his passion. I love the fire in his belly.
Yeah, it's almost as if
still,
some of
I'm
his
voting
points
guilty.
were jokes or something.
Right. Guilty it is. Let's go tell that handsome judge.
I can't wait to boo.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Octopussy, we find the defendant guilty.
Boo!
The verdict is so rendered. Octopussy is hereby sentenced to a retitling as the less obscene Octovagina. Court is adjourned.
He's right, though. No, he's right. It is. Hello, this is Ernst Stavros Sackfeld reporting for the Gavelgul Gazette.
Suckfeld is right.
Hey, quiet you. Come here, Mr. Maynard Banks. How do you feel about today's verdict? And would you like to pet this cat that I actually have? You can hear him purring.
Yes, this is a very nice cat, a pussy. This brought me no pleasure. You know, I love the Bond movies, but I had to do what I had to do. Octopussy was always my least favorite of the Moors growing up, and upon rewatch, I think I confirmed the line. So, justice was done.
Very good. You may take the secret elevator back to the studio. Matt Sherman! Come here, my friend. Unfortunately, you were not able to pull out this victory. How do you feel today?
It was like watching the original Rocky as not guilty, then guilty came in. It was a split decision, and the the prosecution did a great job. We did our best, and so having obtained top-notch consulting from the esteemed firm of Wee, Cheatham, and Howe, we intend to appeal this foolish decision, and we will win. Justice will be served on celluloid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sherman. That is all we have from the courthouse today. So now back to the studio for post-trial analysis. And again, I am petting a real cat. You can hear it purring, possibly meowing, maybe even scratching me.
Thank you, Ben. That's what we're going to use now.
Dang it now. Ben, don't give him the out.
What a case.
Wow, dude, Matt, holy crap, dude, you were hilarious. That was a great case. I love it.
Good for you and your team of writers that are working around the clock. Feed you fresh material.
Oh my god, that was so good.
So kind. I tried to follow Mr. Fleming's own writing style, where he would have a couple of doubles and smoke 70 cigarettes a day on any given afternoon.
And it worked for him. That brought us Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Now, is your impression of Ian Fleming based on, or that's how you do British people?
There is a single recording of him.
I try not to do British people. My wife doesn't like it, but actually you can hear Mr. Fleming talking like this on radio programs.
Yeah.
The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation recorded him in the BBC, and you can hear that he speaks without any particular English accent, just very clearly and plainly, which works the best when he explains that his books were written for heterosexual readers who are designed to strike them somewhere between the navel and the solar plexus. They're not meant for young boys.
Now, Matt,
well, I like them anyway.
What's been keeping you busy? What have you been working on besides impressions?
I have something I do often. It's called a job. But when I'm not at work, in my other life, my wife, Janine Sherman, and I, we do a lot of fan projects. I have several books out in print on bond, and I speak at academic conferences. But my number one fan passion is collecting collectors, and we host annual and semi-annual locations tours. So the reason why we keep the energy up is when you have 20 to 50 James Bond experts with you, they're all super collectors. They all have props. They all have books. They all have screen accurate clothing or authentic Daniel Craig clothing. Your trivia has to be really good. Your special guests have to be really good. So we try to keep it exciting, and we'll go touring all day in Jamaica and then come back to a resort and play some theme games at night or dine and play together. We have a great time. So even today I was working on yet another tour in Jamaica, because when we return in October, we're going to visit No Time to Die locations. Very exciting.
That sounds awesome.
Like that cool nuclear plant that was abandoned, right?
Absolutely. You do have time to
there are, believe it or not, there's about 24 spots I'm going to take people to in Jamaica for No Time to Die alone. And we're also going to see a couple dozen spots from Live and Let Die, Dr. No, and Ian Fleming's World. And we take half days over the course of about 9 days in Jamaica and spend time together, and it's a blast.
Nice.
So you've been everywhere.
Isn't that where his house is? Goldeneye?
Yeah,
is that in Jamaica?
Yes, that's right. I brought several groups inside Goldeneye Resort and to Mr. Fleming's desk where he wrote the novels and short stories, down to his private beach where he would go spearfishing when he wasn't drinking, smoking, committing adultery, or writing books.
So Matt, you mentioned you're a collector, and I understand you have an impressive collection. What would you say is the crown? I got a two-part question. What is the crown jewel of your collection, and what is the holy grail for 007 collectors? Like, what's out there that they would really want?
I'll answer the second one first because it's really fascinating. What's really taken off in recent years is Bond clothing. And It's weird because a friend says, I just got this Tom Ford tie for only $300. And I'm like, yes, but Quantum of Solace was 12 years ago. It's an outdated tie, but good for you. Not that I pick on my friends, but seriously, people are spending thousands of dollars on clothing. And I'm like, dude, you should be going to the Jamaica tour instead. But people collect soap and people collect pajamas from James Bond from the 60s and shoes and toys and die casts. I've really been into genuine props for some years now, about 10 years. So I can tell you that just yesterday, I got a foam head, no pun intended, because the day before I was getting that foam head, because the day before, 2 days ago, I received a production-made fiberglass mask that was used to film the pre-titles Inspector, Day of the Dead in Mexico City. And I'd been to that location, and I had tried on one of the original masks with Robert Alsop, who made the masks for the costume designer. And it's just this amazing kind of grail piece because I have this big old mask, and when I put it on my face, then I look like Danny Craig because I have a mask on. So that was really cool.
Awesome.
And there's a lot of holy grails.
I need one of those for my next date, right?
It is available for a rental to the right face.
Oh,
And-
cool.
Hey, all right.
And all you
There's a
need
lot of
is
holy
an
grails
Aston
out there.
Martin. Just
Aston Martins. Yeah, I mean, people come to an event, right? Like I'm doing a show at a library or a concert or a museum, and people say, yeah, I collect Aston Martins. I go, really cool. I have some Danbury Aston Martins and some Corgi toys. And they go, no. I collect Aston Martins. And I have the one from Majesty's Secret Service, and I have a DB5. Now, the silver birch DB5 that we see in about 7 Bond films until a few years ago was $100,000 in working condition. Because they've been using them over and again in the Danny Craig films, they're now about $1 million plus in working condition.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
grail for a lot of people. And Janine and I have had one in front of our home, and I've ridden around in one, and I've raced one down the block. But that's a story for another day. But there's so many grails out there, and it seems like every collector wants something different. Some of them have said they just want to collect Maud Adams, which is kind of strange. But I can tell you that Maud Adams has kissed me before and has kissed my wife, but not at the same time.
I
Hey,
do
all
want
right.
to apologize to Maud Adams. She didn't deserve any of what I put her through.
Yeah, I
no.
agree with
Yeah, that was a lot, Maynard, but it was
I have
hilarious.
to prove I'm still the bad boy of that courtroom.
Yeah, you
no.
can't see it, but he's wearing sunglasses right now.
Do you know anyone who has a full metal teeth array?
Wow. The original casting is held by Eon Productions and goes with them on their now museum tours that they do around the world. And true story, it was so painful to wear that in between every take where he's biting licorice, Richard Keel is biting licorice to look like he's biting through cable, he had to pull him out of his mouth for every take. And he was so gracious, just this really sweet Christian, nice guy, all through Spy Who Loved Me. The true story that most people don't know, Louis Gilbert's granddaughter, the director's granddaughter, said, Grandpa, he's so nice. Does he really have to die at the end? And they started to think about it and brought him back for Moonraker. That's how he got cast in
Gave
2
him the
films.
I
And
love it.
Richard Keel was at one of our events, and I asked him, I was emceeing, I said, what was your favorite films that you've done? Can you name a few? And he said Force 10 from Navarone and Reunited with Barbara Bach, as you all know.
Ega.
But he actually said Moonraker, and all of the group went, what do you mean Moonraker, right? Like Spy Who Loved Me, right? Where he was the most famous guy in the world. He said, no. In Moonraker, instead of being the heavy, which I've been on 100 TV shows like Lassie and Twilight Zone and Gilligan's Island, instead of being the big dumb guy, I get to do a character arc. I start out as a baddie, then I go to Bond's ally. And he's like, I had to act it all and say one line of dialogue in Moonraker. And so he felt like that was an achievement, a crown of his in his acting career. So little shot there for Moonraker. It's still a bad film. Just kidding.
No, it is technically. We found it. It's official. And
Oh, we did,
I
but
want a giant
I'm
cable.
rethinking.
I want a giant cable of licorice. That sounds delicious. Now, Matt, we always ask for recommendations from our guests for a movie you think people should check out. So, what is a movie our listeners should check out?
Ha! I'm going to recommend, get ready for it, drum roll please, 1985's A View to a Kill, starring Roger Moore's Bond. He's even older than Octopussy.
Yep.
It's a
Nice.
fabulous
Tanya
film.
Roberts is
One of my
younger.
favorite films, and I just came from San Francisco. I was there very briefly, but I dragged my wife. My wife and I went to James Bond locations all over the city, like Fisherman's Wharf and where the trolley cars cut each other off. So the whole
And you
point of
climbed to the
Octopus
Golden
and View to
Gate
Kill
Bridge.
is Bond getting bested and Bond being old and world weary, and yes, a little lucky. But View to a Kill deserves a second or even a third look, shall I say. So watch it and enjoy. I was watching it recently on a big screen, and the steeplechase was unbelievable on the big screen. It was dramatic and exciting, and yeah, the stuntmen helped. But View to a Kill is actually a fun Bond film that a lot of people haven't seen because of its undeserved, underrated reputation. And if you want to read, and not many of us do, I know I don't read very much, but if you want to read Andrew McNess's book, In Defense of A View to a Kill, it's Andrew's favorite Bond film of all the Bond films. He's a fan over in the other part of the world in Australia. And I was so impressed with the book that I wrote a foreword for it because he makes a great case that A View to a Kill is a great Bond film.
I can't disagree. View to a Kill is one of my favorites. Not even just more. I don't know why. View to a Kill I love. He is older. Tanya Roberts is horribly annoying, but Christopher Walken and Grace Jones bring it home, and the plot is great. Operation Main Strike is great. So I totally agree. View to a Kill is one of my
Hey, if that guy's written a whole book about it, he should have no problem coming on the show and defending it then.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
And I'll be the prosecution just to be devil's advocate.
Let's get that set up. I like it. I like it.
Like really turn it on now too.
So Maynard, you were the prosecutor. What are you recommending this week?
I'm recommending another film that features a Fabergé egg at its center, and that is the comedic action film Game Night from 2018.
Yes.
It stars Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams as a married couple who have one of their regular couples game nights interrupted by a seemingly real-life web of criminal intrigue. Or is it? I'm just kidding.
Great movie. Loved it. Saw it in theaters. Really good recommendation.
Yep. Jesse Plemons plays their neighbor, too, a newly divorced police officer who has recently been estranged from the playgroup, and his performance stands out as the most hilarious and memorable among a very strong showing by all. It's a funny comedy that knows how to weave humor into its more action-driven sequences, but also manages to deliver a bit of heart at the end. Game Night is currently streaming nowhere, so if you want to see it, you'll have to rent it or buy it, but do so. I don't think you'll regret it. It even comes with Ryan Luis Rodriguez's seal of approval. Yes,
it does.
I took that shot in the dark, but I was right.
Well, I mean, it is a good film. Yeah.
Ryan, what's your recommendation?
Tracking from the end of the Cold War to the middle of the Cold War, my recommendation this week is technically two movies, but I'm not breaking the rules because it's really two separate halves of the same movie. I'm talking about Steven Soderbergh's 4.5-hour biopic of Ernesto Che Guevara from 2008 called simply Che. The film, or rather films, divide Guevara's political exploits into his efforts in Cuba to liberate the country from Batista's dictatorship and his efforts to bring revolution to the people of Bolivia, which naturally results in his death. While I prefer the first half, particularly its depiction of guerrilla warfare, the complete experience is deeply rewarding in typical Soderberghian fashion, a director whose misfires are more interesting than most directors' highest peaks. Che Parts 1 and 2 are currently streaming on the Criterion channel.
I'd like to say that, Ryan, you're using the word liberate very loosely when you look at Castro's reign.
I'm not getting into this right now.
I'm just saying.
Dylan, what's your recommendation?
It's a good thing you're going to me because I'm also going to recommend the Che movie. No, I'm kidding. My recommendation is much better. And I am recommending The Return of Swamp Thing from 1989. And I know what you're thinking. The reason I'm doing it is because I've already recommended the first Swamp Thing, and I just wanted to give another shout out to Luis Jordan, who plays Dr. Anton Arcane, and he is absolutely fantastic in this movie. You've got Dick DeRock reprising his role as Swamp Thing, and you have a vivacious Heather Locklear as Abby Arcane. Now, this movie is a bit sillier than the Wes Craven movie, but it is a lot of fun. There's some good action. And I'm told by people who would know that it was recently riffed on Riff Tracks. And I know our audience.
It's going to be released in theaters.
Yeah.
Well, when does this episode come out?
At that time, man, it's out now. Yes,
still 2 months away, but still.
It's probably.
You know what?
Probably
I'm chancing it. Go to Riff Tracks right now. It will be there. And if it's not, demand a refund. All right. So there you go. Bada bing.
Bada bing. There it is.
August.
Oh, probably
August.
No, there you go. And it'll be in theaters, like as a Fathom event first, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, are they going to do? Oh, dude, we should go to that. That would be fun.
Yes, enjoy that.
Or we went to it.
No, it's not. It's not August yet. God, I hope.
Hey, what if someone's listening to this episode late? Like Bobby's a few weeks behind, you know?
Bobby always listened to us when we first
Bobby.
come out. He's a loyal listener. Big Ben, send us on home.
I'm going to recommend a more down-to-earth take on the spy genre and go with another South Korean film I caught recently and say you should check out The Spy Gone North. This film takes us back to 1993 when Kim Jong-il was still in power and focuses on a military man who intentionally sabotages his own career to get the attention of the North Koreans, and he tries to determine the strength of their nuclear program. This film is a true thriller as he finds himself being pulled into the lake dictator's lair with many of the country's military brass circling around him, some unsure of his loyalties. It's loosely based on true events and boasts a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So if spy games and post-Cold War Korea sounds all up your alley. Go ahead and check this one out. From The Usual Suspects, it also comes Ryan Luis Rodriguez approved.
Fantastic.
Oh, damn.
It actually that sounds
Sorry,
really
man.
good, but I want to check that one out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do actually. want to see that.
100% based on one review on Rotten Tomatoes. Fantastic. But 93, North Korea, that's right around the time WCW went there. So.
Oh, there you go. And that's a story for another day.
Another day. But with that, we are all out of show for the week. But we want to thank our guest, Matt Sherman, for joining us. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, and a shout out to Tom Cole, publisher extraordinaire, who turned me on to the Reels of Justice podcast. It's fabulous, and I'm chuffed to be here, as the British say. Thank you very much.
We loved having you, dude. You are excellent. This was a great show.
But cut back on the coffee, baby. And we hope everyone will join us as well next time as the Reels of Justice keep turning.
Pound it!
Eggs!
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.